Emily Dawson had not been looking for love when she first met Michael Harris. She was fresh out of college, starting her first real job at a mid-sized company in downtown Cleveland, still finding her footing in the corporate world. Michael, a few years older, worked there as an administrator, organized, steady, someone the younger employees leaned on when they felt overwhelmed. Their connection began quietly, through small acts of kindness. He helped her navigate systems, showed her the ropes, explained things patiently without ever talking down to her. What began as mentorship soon grew into easy conversations during coffee breaks, then long walks after work, and eventually something more. Over time, Emily discovered just how compatible they were. Michael wasn't flashy or loud. He was steady, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. They both loved music that told a story, road trips with no fixed destination, and the simple joy of cooking a meal together at the end of a long day. Within a year, they had moved in together. Their apartment in Cleveland wasn't large, but it was warm and filled with small traditions: Friday night takeout, Sunday morning pancakes, and at least once a month a little weekend trip to another Ohio town or sometimes across state lines to Pennsylvania. Michael never separated household chores into his and hers. If he got home first, he would cook dinner, sometimes even experiment with new recipes. If Emily was free, she would fold laundry or plan their next getaway. Their life together was seamless, built on quiet gestures of respect. Friends often remarked on how comfortable they seemed, how natural their relationship felt. One detail, though, always stood out: Michael never touched alcohol. At gatherings, when beers were passed around or wine was poured, he politely declined. I'm an athlete, he would explain with a smile. Been boxing since I was 7. My body doesn't handle alcohol well. Honestly, I don't even like the smell. It wasn't offensive, just matter of fact, and most people let it go. Emily admired the discipline. To her, it signaled self-control and commitment, traits she valued deeply. As their relationship matured, talk of marriage became inevitable. Emily's parents, Patricia and George Dawson, had known for months that she was serious about Michael. Naturally, they wanted to meet him. So one Saturday, Emily brought Michael to the Dawson home on the east side of Cleveland. Patricia, warm and gracious, had prepared a table full of food: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, her famous apple pie. George, more reserved but equally welcoming, poured drinks and made space at the table. They treated Michael not as a guest, but almost as family from the moment he walked in. Conversation flowed easily. George asked about Michael's job, his hobbies, his outlook on life. Michael, polite and articulate, answered without hesitation. He admitted his love for hiking, his habit of early morning runs along Lake Erie, his preference for quiet evenings over noisy parties. Patricia noticed the way he looked at Emily, soft but steady, with a kind of protective warmth. Still, as the evening wore on, a subtle question lingered in Patricia's mind. Between bites of pie, she finally asked, "So, Michael, tell us a little about your family." "Emily hasn't said much. We'd love to know more." Michael froze just for a moment. It was quick, so quick most people wouldn't have noticed, but Emily did. His smile faltered, then returned, practiced and calm. "Oh, they're in another part of Ohio," he said lightly. "Not much to tell, really. We don't see each other often." He shifted the topic with disarming charm, asking George about his work in logistics, steering the spotlight away from himself. Patricia exchanged a glance with her husband, then with Emily. It wasn't suspicion exactly, but curiosity. Why had Emily never met his family? Why, in all the time they had been together, had Michael never brought them up? Emily noticed it too. For the first time since she had fallen for him, she realized there was a part of Michael's life she knew almost nothing about. It wasn't the absence of detail that unsettled her, it was the way he deflected, as though there were doors he refused to open. The night ended warmly. Michael thanked Patricia for the meal, shook George's hand firmly, and helped Emily with her coat. But as they drove home, the warmth of the evening gave way to an unspoken tension. Emily stared out the window, wondering about the parts of Michael's story that remained hidden. He had given her his time, his kindness, his love. Yet behind that steady smile, there was a silence, one that seemed to stretch further than the miles between Cleveland and whatever town he came from. A silence Emily couldn't shake, no matter how much she tried. Winter had barely lifted when talk of a wedding began to fill the Dawson household. Patricia loved nothing more than to imagine her only daughter in white, walking down an aisle lined with flowers, every guest rising to watch. George, practical as always, pretended not to care about the details, but Emily caught him smiling when Patricia talked about the first dance or the champagne toast. To her parents, a wedding was not just a formality, it was a celebration of family, tradition, and the life they had worked so hard to give their daughter. Michael, however, saw it differently. One evening in their small Cleveland apartment, over takeout containers and the hum of the radiator, he brought up, he began carefully, "What would you think about keeping the wedding small? Just us, maybe a few close friends. Something simple, like a courthouse ceremony and dinner afterward. No limos, no banquet halls, none of that." Emily tilted her head, surprised. She had always imagined something modest, but still festive. Family gathered, music playing, photographs to frame. "Small, sure," she said, "but you mean no reception at all?" Michael shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Why spend money feeding 100 people we hardly know? We could use that money for a honeymoon or maybe a down payment on a house. Something that actually matters for our future." His reasoning made sense. Practical, even romantic in its own way. Yet when Emily mentioned it to her parents, Patricia gasped in disbelief. "No reception? Absolutely not. Emily, you deserve a proper wedding. We've been waiting for this day since you were born. I don't care if we have to pay for it ourselves. We will. You're our daughter, and you should have the celebration you dream of." George backed her up with a quiet nod. "It's not just about you two, sweetheart. It's about family too, about honoring the commitment you're making." Emily stood between them, torn. She wanted to respect Michael's wishes, but she also couldn't ignore the sparkle in her mother's eyes, the determination in her father's voice. They wanted to give her the kind of day they believed she deserved, a once-in-a-lifetime event. The following weekend, as she and Michael folded laundry, Emily tried again. "My parents really want a bigger wedding," she said gently. "They're even willing to pay. It's important to them." Michael's hand stilled a T-shirt caught mid-fold. He set it down, then exhaled. "Emily, my parents won't be there." The words landed heavily. Emily blinked, startled. "What do you mean? You haven't even told them the date yet." "I don't need to," he said, turning away. "They won't come. That's just how it is." "But, Michael," she pressed, "this is your wedding too. Don't you want your family there? Your mom, your dad, anyone?" He shook his head, jaw tight. "It's not possible. They're busy. Let's just leave it at that." The explanation was thin, barely more than air. Emily felt frustration rise in her chest. It wasn't that his parents couldn't come. Life had obstacles. Everyone understood that. It was the way he shut down the conversation, refusing to offer even the smallest detail, as if the subject itself were forbidden. She tried to smile, to let it go, but later that night, lying awake beside him, she couldn't. Michael had given her every reason to trust him, yet this silence gnawed at her. Weddings were about union, two families coming together, not just two people signing papers. Why was he so determined to keep his side in the shadows? Emily told herself not to push. He would open up when he was ready. Still, as the days passed, the questions lingered. Why had she never met his family? Why did he never call them, never mention their names? What was he hiding behind that calm, steady face? The doubts were quiet at first, easy to drown out in the rhythm of daily life. But like water seeping through cracks in a wall, they kept returning, soft yet insistent. For the first time since they had moved in together, Emily wondered if she truly knew the man she planned to marry. The idea had been simmering in Emily's mind ever since that night when Michael, with eyes turned away, insisted his parents would not attend the wedding. He hadn't given her a reason, only a wall of silence. The more he refused to explain, the more her curiosity burned. A week later, Michael mentioned he had to leave on a short business trip. It wasn't unusual. His job occasionally sent him to other Ohio towns for administrative work. He asked if she wanted to come along, but Emily shook her head, claiming she had reports to finish and little desire to wander alone while he sat in meetings. Michael accepted her answer easily, kissed her forehead the next morning, and left before dawn with a small overnight bag. Emily watched the taxi pull away from their apartment building, her heart thudding in her chest. She had already made her decision. That evening, while tidying the apartment, she found the confirmation she had been looking for. Inside the glove compartment of Michael's car, where he sometimes left insurance papers and old mail, there was a folded envelope addressed to Carol Harris in Youngstown. Emily stared at the name. She remembered Michael once saying his mother's first name, quickly as though by accident. Carol. It had to be her. She held the envelope for a long time, debating. It felt like trespassing, like crossing a line she had promised herself never to cross. But there it was, the address he had hidden, the link to the family he refused to talk about. She slipped the paper into her purse. The next morning, Emily packed a small bag and told her parents she would be running errands outside Cleveland. Then she got into her car and set the GPS to Youngstown. The highway stretched long and flat before her, the winter sun pale and cold against the windshield. As the miles rolled by, the scenery shifted from the bustle of Cleveland's outer suburbs to the quieter, grayer edges of Ohio's Rust Belt. Empty warehouses with broken windows loomed along the road. Old factories, once the heartbeat of steel production, now sat abandoned, their smokestacks pointing like jagged fingers at the sky. Closer to Youngstown, the decline was impossible to miss. Rows of houses sagged against one another, porches caving in, windows boarded. Some streets looked as though life had bled out of them years ago, leaving only shells behind. A liquor store stood on the corner, its neon sign buzzing faintly even in daylight. Across from it, a half-shuttered diner leaned beneath a faded awning. Emily gripped the wheel tighter. She had grown up in a stable, middle-class neighborhood, where lawns were mowed and neighbors waved at each other across driveways. Here, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional bark of a stray dog or the thud of music spilling from a passing car. Her GPS directed her off the main road and into a narrow residential street. Potholes lined the cracked asphalt. Yards were overgrown, fences splintered and falling apart. In front of one house, a rusted pickup truck sat on blocks, its tires missing. Laundry flapped stiffly on a line, though the cloth was so worn it was almost colorless. She slowed down, heart pounding. This was the world Michael had left behind, the world he had never wanted her to see. She thought about his refusal to drink, his avoidance of family talk, his insistence that his parents wouldn't come to the wedding. In this landscape, his silence began to make sense. Emily parked her car near a corner store with a sagging roof and a hand-painted sign. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the address on the paper, unsure if she had the courage to knock on the door once she found it. Her stomach twisted with guilt. She loved Michael. She trusted him, but she couldn't build a marriage on shadows. Taking a deep breath, she started the engine again and drove deeper into the neighborhood. Each turn seemed to lead her further into abandonment, as though time had forgotten this part of Ohio. Houses leaned like weary old men. A child's tricycle, rusted and broken, lay overturned in a yard choked with weeds. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, long and mournful. The closer she came to the address, the more Emily felt the weight of what she was about to uncover. This was no longer about curiosity. It was about truth. The truth behind the man she loved, the truth he was too afraid or ashamed to share. Finally, she saw the number painted crookedly on a cracked mailbox. Harris. Her chest tightened. She pulled the car to the curb and turned off the ignition. For a long moment, she didn't move. The house before her sagged under its own weight, the porch littered with beer cans, the curtains yellowed and stiff. Emily closed her eyes, inhaled once, then opened the car door. The cold air bit her cheeks as she stepped out, the sound of her boots crunching against gravel far too loud in the empty street. Whatever secrets Michael had buried here, she was about to face them. Alone, Emily stood before the sagging house, the number on the mailbox barely legible beneath layers of rust and peeling paint. Her breath fogged in the cold air as she climbed the creaking porch steps. The smell hit her first, stale beer, sour liquor, and something acrid that clung to the boards. For a moment, she almost turned back. She knocked. At first there was no response, only the muffled drone of a television from somewhere inside. She tried again, louder this time. A voice barked from within, low and irritable. The door cracked open to reveal a woman who looked older than her years. Carol Harris's hair was matted, her face blotched and tired, her eyes rimmed red. A faded bathrobe hung from her thin shoulders, stained with food and liquor. She squinted at Emily suspiciously, gripping the doorframe as if to steady herself. "What? If you're from the electric company, I told you I don't have it. You can shut it off, see if I care. No TV, no fridge, doesn't matter." Her words slurred slightly, a bottle of cheap vodka dangling from one hand. Emily froze, heart racing. I'm looking for Carol Harris," she said carefully. "You found her." Carol's gaze sharpened, scanning Emily from head to toe. The robe shifted as she crossed her arms. "Who are you and what do you want?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a young voice rang out from deeper inside. "Mom, leave her alone. She's not the power company." A girl appeared in the hallway, a thin figure, maybe 12 years old, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were startlingly green, sharp and unflinching. She carried herself with a defiance that seemed far too old for her age. "Go back to your room, Lily," Carol snapped, her words coated with bitterness. But Lily didn't move. Instead, she squared her shoulders and glared at her mother. "You're just going to try to take her money, like you always do. Shut your mouth." Carol lunged toward her, swaying on her feet. The vodka bottle sloshed. Lily darted back a step, her voice rising. "You sold my jacket for booze. You sold the new boots Michael bought me. You'd sell the phone too if I let you. That's why he doesn't come here anymore." The words hung heavy in the air. Emily felt her stomach drop. Michael's name, spoken with such anger, such raw hurt. Carol's face twisted, equal parts shame and rage. "Don't you talk about your brother like you know him. You don't know what he's done for this family. You don't know what I've had to do." Lily's hands clenched at her sides, her small chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. "You've done nothing but drink. Daniel's gone, and Michael hates this place because of you. And when I grow up, I'm leaving too." Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't waver. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her mind spinning. She had come searching for answers, and here they were, ugly, raw, spilling out in front of her. Carol turned back to Emily, suddenly remembering the stranger on her porch. Her expression hardened. "You, whoever you are, you don't belong here. Get off my property." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Part of her wanted to obey, to run back to the safety of her car and forget she had ever come. But then she looked at Lily, at those fierce green eyes filled with a mix of courage and desperation. The girl's gaze lingered on her, silently pleading, though her lips said nothing. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, stepping back onto the porch. "I didn't mean to intrude." Carol slammed the door shut, the sound reverberating through the brittle walls. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Emily stood there a moment longer, her breath visible in the fading light, her heart pounding as though it might break free of her chest. Through the thin curtains of a cracked window, she caught a glimpse of Lily retreating down the hall, her shoulders tense, her small frame hunched against the chaos that filled the house. Emily knew one thing with certainty. Whatever Michael had tried to bury, whatever silence he had built between his past and his present, it was real. And it was darker than she had imagined. The door had barely slammed when Lily bolted out the side of the house, her sneakers pounding against the cracked sidewalk. Emily stood frozen for a moment. Then instinct pulled her forward. She couldn't leave the girl alone. Not after what she had just witnessed. "Lily, wait," Emily called, her voice catching in the cold afternoon air. The girl didn't slow. She darted down the street, slipping between two leaning houses, her small frame moving with surprising speed. Emily hurried after her, her boots crunching over gravel and broken glass. Her heart raced, not just from the chase, but from the gnawing sense that if she let Lily disappear now, she might never find the truth Michael had spent his life hiding. After several blocks, the road opened into a clearing. An old convenience store squatted on the corner, its sign faded and its windows grimy. Beyond it, a narrow dirt path wound toward a stretch of water glinting faintly in the pale sun. Emily spotted Lily heading in that direction, shoulders stiff, hands shoved into her jacket pockets. Emily ducked into the store first, the bell over the door giving a weak jingle. Inside, the air was stale, lined with shelves of canned soup, dusty boxes of cereal, and a cooler humming with soda and cheap beer. She grabbed a packet of cookies, a stick of beef jerky, and a few brightly wrapped lollipops from a jar by the counter. The cashier, an older man with weary eyes, rang her up without comment. When Emily stepped back outside, Lily was waiting at the edge of the path, arms crossed. Her eyes, those piercing green eyes, narrowed. "Why are you following me?" Emily held up the bag. "I thought you might want something to eat. That's all." For a moment, Lily didn't move. Then, with a shrug that tried to look careless but carried the weight of exhaustion, she turned toward the lake. "Fine, but I'm not going back home right now." Emily followed her down the path. It led to a small lake, ringed by bare trees and scattered rocks. The water was calm, reflecting the washed-out sky. Lily sat on a fallen log near the bank, pulling her knees to her chest. Emily sat a few feet away, opening the bag and setting the snacks between them. "Here," Emily said softly. "Take whatever you like." Lily eyed the cookies, then reached for one. She bit into it, chewing slowly, her face unreadable. After a moment, she took a lollipop too, rolling the stick between her fingers. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft lapping of water against the shore. Emily didn't rush it. She knew better than to push. Finally, Lily spoke. Her voice was quieter now, stripped of the defiance she'd shown her mother. "You're not from around here. I can tell. Why did you come?" Emily hesitated. The truth pressed against her chest. I know your brother, Michael." At the sound of his name, Lily's head snapped up. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. "You're lying." "I'm not," Emily said quickly. "I'm engaged to him. We're supposed to get married soon." For a long moment, Lily just stared. Then, slowly, her shoulders dropped. "So that's why you showed up." She looked out at the water, her voice hardening. "He doesn't talk about us, does he?" Emily shook her head gently. "No, he never has. That's why I came. I wanted to understand." Lily gave a sharp laugh, one that didn't carry any humor. "Of course he doesn't. Why would he? This place, my mom, it's nothing he'd want you to see." Emily stayed quiet, letting the girls' words come on their own. Lily picked at the wrapper of her lollipop, then began, her voice low but steady. "Michael used to come home a lot, back when Daniel was still alive. He tried to help, tried to take care of things. But Mom, she was always drinking, selling whatever she could for booze. Jackets, shoes, even my school supplies. Michael stopped bringing stuff because she'd just traded away. He hated it here, hated her, but he loved us, especially Daniel. Her throat tightened and she paused. Emily's heart clenched. She could hear the truth pressing at the edges of Lily's voice, a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to bear. Daniel was different, Lily whispered. He was strong. He always protected me, even from Mom's boyfriends. But one night, one of them came after her with a knife. Daniel stepped in. She stopped, staring at the lake as though the water itself might swallow the memory. He didn't make it. Emily's chest ached. She wanted to reach out, to put a hand on Lily's shoulder, but she didn't. The girl wasn't asking for comfort. She was telling her story because no one else would. "That's why Michael doesn't come back," Lily said finally, turning those green eyes on Emily. "He blames himself. He thinks if he'd been here, Daniel would still be alive. But he couldn't save him. He couldn't save any of us." The wind rippled across the lake, carrying the bitter smell of smoke from somewhere in the distance. Emily swallowed hard. In that moment, she understood why Michael never drank, why he never mentioned his family, why he shut down whenever she asked. His silence wasn't pride or secrecy. It was grief. And sitting beside Lily, Emily knew the truth she had uncovered was only the beginning. The wind off the lake carried a damp chill, and Emily pulled her coat tighter, but she didn't move. Lily sat hunched forward on the log, elbows on her knees, staring at the water as though the stories trapped inside her would only come out if she kept her eyes fixed on something steady. "There were 4 of us," Lily began, her voice flat but edged with a bitterness too old for a 12-year-old. "My oldest sister is Sarah. She got married before she even finished high school. She's got kids now, a couple of them, maybe more. We don't see her much. Then there's Michael. Then Daniel, he was only a year younger than Michael. And then me." Emily's breath caught. She could picture Michael as an older brother, protective and steady. But Daniel, his name hung in the air like a ghost. "Sarah's always been kind of a mess," Lily went on. "She married this guy who drinks almost as much as Mom. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they make up, sometimes the police come. Social services showed up once, almost took her kids. She cleaned up just long enough to keep them, but it never really changes. That's just the way things are with her." She picked at a thread on her jeans, then tore it free. Michael left as soon as he could. He went to community college in Cleveland, started working, tried to make a life for himself. He'd come back on weekends, bring us food or clothes. He always worried about me and Daniel. He'd yell at Mom, try to make her stop drinking, but it never stuck. She'd just wait until he was gone and then start again. Emily swallowed hard, trying to keep her expression neutral, though her stomach twisted. "Daniel was different," Lily whispered. "He stayed. He tried to hold things together, especially when Michael was away. He protected me, even from Mom. And he really believed he could save her." Her voice cracked. Emily waited, letting the silence hold space. "One winter, a couple years ago, Mom was with this guy," Lily said finally. "His name was Tony. He was mean. Always drunk, always angry. One night, he came after her with a knife. I don't even know what they were fighting about. Something stupid, probably. Daniel jumped in. He tried to get between them, tried to stop Tony. He got stabbed before anyone could do anything." The words hit Emily like a blow. She covered her mouth, horrified. "By the time the ambulance came, it was too late," Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel bled out on the floor. Michael wasn't here that weekend. He couldn't make it back because of a snowstorm. He said later that if he'd been here, Daniel wouldn't have died. He screamed at Mom at the funeral, told her she'd killed him. And maybe she did. If she hadn't let Tony into our lives, Daniel would still be alive." Emily blinked back tears, her throat tight. She could almost see it, the cramped living room, the shouting, the flash of a knife, Daniel collapsing while his little sister watched. "Michael never came back after that," Lily said. "Not really. He showed up one last time, to pack his things and to make sure I had what I needed. He gave me a card opened a bank account for me, put money in whenever he could. But he wouldn't step inside the house again. He told Mom if she brought another man around, he'd call the cops and have him locked up. And I believed him. Everyone did. People around here don't mess with Michael anymore. But he still won't come back. Lily finally turned to look at Emily. Her eyes were wet but hard, daring Emily to deny her story. That's why he doesn't drink. That's why he never talks about us. He hates alcohol, hates what it does, hates her, and he blames himself every single day for Daniel. Emily's chest ached. She wanted to gather the girl into her arms, to tell her it wasn't Michael's fault, that no one could have stopped a storm or changed that night. But she understood now why Michael had built such thick walls around his past. Every sip of liquor, every shadow of that house, carried the memory of blood on the floor and the brother he couldn't save. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The lake shimmered dully, the sun sliding lower, casting the world in shades of gray. Emily stared at the water, trying to absorb the weight of what she had just heard. She thought about the man she knew, the man who laughed softly when she burned pancakes, who folded laundry without complaint, who kissed her hand in passing as though it was the most natural thing in the world. And now, beneath all of that, she saw the grief he carried like a second skin. It wasn't shame that kept him silent. It was pain. Pain so deep he couldn't bear to name it. Emily closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time, she fully understood why Michael never raised a glass, never let himself relax when others lost themselves in drink. For him, alcohol wasn't a casual indulgence. It was the reason his family had fallen apart, the reason his brother was buried in the ground, the reason he kept Lily at arm's length though he loved her fiercely. And for Emily, the truth was both devastating and clarifying. The silence that had once unsettled her now made heartbreaking sense. The drive back to Cleveland felt longer than the drive out, though the distance was the same. The highway stretched on endlessly, but Emily's mind was heavier now, weighed down by what she had learned at the lake. Lily's voice replayed in her head, flat, matter-of-fact, yet filled with wounds so deep they would never fully close. For siblings, a mother consumed by addiction, a brother buried too young, and Michael caught in the middle of it all, carrying guilt that was never his to bear. Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel. For years she had wondered about Michael's silence, his refusal to speak of family, his unyielding avoidance of alcohol. Now she understood. Every sip of whiskey or beer didn't just remind him of the chaos he had escaped. It dragged him back to the night he lost Daniel. His abstinence wasn't discipline alone. It was survival. The city skyline came into view, the familiar outlines of Cleveland rising against the fading afternoon sky. Emily's chest ached with conflicting emotions. She loved Michael more deeply than ever, knowing now the strength it had taken for him to build a new life. But she couldn't ignore the girl she had left behind. Lily, with her fierce green eyes and brittle courage, was still stuck in that collapsing house, still bracing against the chaos that had already stolen too much from her. When Emily finally stepped into her parents' home that evening, Patricia noticed the shadow in her daughter's eyes at once. Dinner sat waiting on the table. Roast chicken, potatoes, the comforting smells of a safe and steady household. But Emily couldn't taste any of it. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Patricia asked softly, touching her hand. Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing you can fix, Mom. I've been thinking about the wedding." George looked up from his plate, curious. "Changed your mind about the big party already?" His tone was light, but there was an edge of surprise. Emily drew a steady breath. "Yes, I don't want the big wedding. I don't need the banquet halls, the limousines, or the flowers. What I want is simple. Just Michael, me, and the people who matter most. And that means Lily should be there." The room fell quiet. Patricia's brows knit in confusion. "Lily, she's his little sister," Emily explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I met her. She deserves better than the life she's stuck in." She deserves to see her brother start fresh, to know she's not forgotten. George leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Emily, we don't even know this girl. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Emily interrupted, her tone firm. She glanced between them, her parents' familiar faces lined with concern. You've given me everything. Stability, safety, love. Lily has none of that. If Michael and I are starting a new life, I want her to be part of it, not left behind. Patricia exchanged a glance with George, her expression softening. You really care about her? Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She's just a child, Mom. She's had to grow up too fast. Michael won't admit it, but he's been keeping her afloat from a distance. And I can't marry him while pretending she doesn't exist. Our wedding should be about love and family, and she is his family. Silence lingered for a moment. Then Patricia reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. If this is what you want, then we'll support you, no matter what. George sighed, shaking his head slowly, but there was no anger in his eyes, only resignation and a trace of pride. All right, no grand wedding. If bringing this girl into your life makes you happy, then that's what we'll do. Relief washed over Emily. For the first time since she had left Youngstown, she felt a sliver of hope. The road ahead would be complicated. Michael's pain wouldn't vanish overnight, and Lily's world couldn't be repaired with a single gesture. But Emily knew one thing with certainty. Love wasn't just about sharing joy. It was about shouldering burdens together, about refusing to turn away from the people who needed you most. That night, as she lay awake in her childhood bedroom, Emily imagined a wedding not filled with glittering chandeliers or endless guest lists, but a small circle of people who truly mattered. She pictured Michael standing beside her, steadier than ever, and Lily, shy but present, watching her brother begin a life where the shadows of their past no longer defined them. And for the first time, Emily felt peace. Not because the questions were gone, but because she finally knew the answers. The days slipped by as spring edged closer, and talk of the wedding lingered in the air. Emily found herself restless, unable to keep the truth she had uncovered locked away any longer. Each time she looked at Michael, his steady hands making coffee, his calm voice discussing their future, she saw the shadows behind his eyes. She carried Lily's words inside her like a secret too heavy to bear. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Emily folded her hands tightly and took a breath. Michael, she said softly, I need to tell you something. He looked up, distracted at first, then wary when he noticed the tension in her voice. What is it? I went to Youngstown. Her words landed like stones on the table between them. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his face drained of color, his mouth parting in shock. You what? His chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back. Emily, why would you? How could you? I met Lily. The name seemed to freeze him. His hand trembled against the edge of the table. You shouldn't have gone there, he whispered, his voice sharp with panic. You don't know what that place is like. You don't know what she's been through, what I've been trying to keep you away from. You weren't supposed to see any of it. Emily reached across the table, her fingers brushing his arm. Michael, listen to me. I do know now. I saw the house. I saw Carol. And I talked to Lily. She's just a child, Michael. She needs you. And she needs to know she's not forgotten. He pulled back as though her touch burned. His breathing quickened, his eyes dark and frantic. You don't understand. I've kept you away from that world for a reason. It's toxic. It destroys everything it touches. I promised myself I'd never drag you into it. Her voice steadied, calm against the storm rising in him. I understand more than you think. I know about Daniel. Lily told me. Michael flinched as if struck. His jaw tightened, and for a long moment he stared at her in silence. Then, slowly, he sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with the weight of memories he had never shared. "I should have been there," he said hoarsely. "If I hadn't stayed in Cleveland that weekend, if I had just pushed through the storm, Daniel would still be alive. He wouldn't have had to fight alone. I failed him, Emily. I failed my brother." Emily's eyes blurred with tears, but her voice remained firm. "It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have stopped that night. No one could. You didn't fail him, Michael. You were a kid yourself. You've carried this guilt for years, but it doesn't belong to you." He shook his head violently. "You don't know what it's like to live with that picture in your head. The blood, the screaming. My mother, too drunk to even realize what had happened until it was too late. I told myself I'd never go back, that I'd cut it off forever. It's the only way I've survived." Emily leaned closer, her hand resting gently over his clenched fists. "Survival isn't enough. Lily is still there. She looks up to you. She loves you, and whether you like it or not, she is part of our life now. When we get married, I want her there. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because she is your family, our family." Michael lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and raw. "You really mean that?" "I do," Emily whispered. "We can't change the past, but we can change the future. For her, for us, for Daniel's memory. Don't you think he would want that?" Michael swallowed hard, his body trembling as if every word had cracked open the wall he had built. At last he nodded, his voice barely audible. Yes, he would. Silence settled, but it was no longer heavy with secrets. For the first time, Michael allowed his pain to be seen, and Emily, steady and unflinching, held it with him. In that moment, the wedding stopped being about parties or traditions. It became about redemption, about building a family not defined by the brokenness of the past, but by the choice to stand together in the present. On a bright Saturday morning in late spring, Emily and Michael stood together at the Mahoning County Courthouse. There was no grand aisle, no orchestra, no sweeping floral arrangements. Just sunlight streaming through tall windows, bouncing off polished floors, and the low hum of a clerk preparing their paperwork. Emily wore a cream-colored dress that brushed her knees, elegant in its simplicity. Michael stood beside her in a navy suit, his posture straight but his hands trembling slightly. When the judge asked them to join hands, Emily felt the strength of his grip, the quiet determination that had carried him through so much darkness. The ceremony was brief. A handful of words, vows spoken softly, signatures scrawled across paper. And then it was done. They were husband and wife. Emily's parents clapped, Patricia dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. George cleared his throat gruffly, hiding emotion behind formality. Two of Michael's closest friends from work offered warm congratulations. But the moment that struck deepest was when Lily, dressed in a borrowed floral dress and sandals that Emily had bought her just days before, stepped forward. She looked small, almost fragile, yet her eyes shone with pride. "You look beautiful," she whispered to Emily before throwing her arms around Michael. He bent down, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. For the first time in years, he let himself believe that family didn't have to mean pain. After the courthouse, they all walked to a small diner just down the street. It wasn't fancy vinyl booths, chrome stools, the smell of bacon and coffee lingering in the air, but it felt right. They filled a corner table with laughter and plates of pancakes, omelets, and burgers. Emily's best friend snapped photos on her phone, capturing moments more genuine than any staged portrait. Michael cutting a piece of cake with Lily grinning beside him. Patricia showing the girl how to stir cream into her coffee. George leaning back with a rare smile as he watched his daughter glow with happiness. The waitress, curious about the small gathering, eventually caught on that it was a wedding celebration. She brought out a slice of pie with "Congratulations" scrawled in chocolate syrup, refusing to take payment for it. The entire table cheered as Emily and Michael shared a forkful. It wasn't champagne in crystal glasses, but it was sweeter than anything either of them had imagined. When the meal ended, Michael stood and cleared his throat, his voice catching as he addressed the table. I know this isn't the kind of wedding people expect, but for me, it's more than I could have asked for. For years, I thought I didn't deserve this. Peace, love, a family that believes in me. Today proves I was wrong. And having Lily here, his voice broke. He reached for his sister's hand. It means everything. Lily squeezed back. Her chin trembling, though, she held her head high. I'm glad you didn't forget me, she whispered, audible enough for only him and Emily. Later, as the plates were cleared and coats gathered, Michael pulled Emily aside. He held a small envelope, documents tucked neatly inside. I already talked to a lawyer, he said, his voice low but steady. I want to start the process of becoming Lily's guardian. CPS will need to evaluate and there'll be court hearings, but I don't want her left in that house any longer than she has to be. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. She touched his cheek, smiling through the emotion swelling in her chest. We'll do it together. She's our responsibility now. Our family. Outside, the afternoon sun bathed the street in golden light. Michael, Emily, and Lily walked side by side, the girl holding both their hands as though afraid to let go. For years, Michael had carried only guilt and loss when he thought of family. Now, with Emily on one side and Lily on the other, he felt something entirely new, hope. After the simple ceremony and the small diner celebration, life began to shift in ways Emily had only dared to imagine. Their apartment, once quiet and perfectly arranged, now carried the sounds of a 12-year-old adjusting to a new world. Lily's laughter echoed down the hallway when she found a pair of rollerblades at a thrift shop Emily had taken her to. Her school books spread across the kitchen table in the evenings, her scribbled notes mixing with Michael's work files and Emily's lesson plans. At first, Lily moved cautiously through the apartment as though afraid the welcome might wear thin. But each day, Emily and Michael reminded her she belonged. They cooked together, shared stories at dinner, and made new routines. Emily helped her with homework, while Michael showed her how to throw a proper punch at the local boxing gym. Slowly, the haunted look in Lily's eyes began to soften. Of course, nothing about the transition was simple. Within weeks, Michael was on the phone with lawyers and social workers, starting the process that would make him Lily's legal guardian. Child Protective Services scheduled home visits, checking their apartment for safety, reviewing their finances, interviewing both Michael and Emily. The court required background checks, letters of reference, proof of steady employment. It was exhausting, but Michael never complained. One evening, after yet another long call with their lawyer, Michael sank onto the couch, running a hand over his face. It feels like they're measuring every inch of me, waiting for me to fail. Emily sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. They're not waiting for you to fail. They just want to be sure Lily's safe. And she is. You've already been taking care of her in every way that matters. Her words proved true. At the first hearing, the judge reviewed the case, noting Michael's clean record, his stable job, and the strong support system provided by Emily and her family. Carol didn't contest the petition. In fact, she didn't even show up. By the end of the summer, Michael received full guardianship of Lily. The day they walked out of the courthouse, Lily clutched the official papers in her hands like a shield against everything she had endured. Michael bent down, his voice breaking. You're with us now. For good. No one can take that away. Emily blinked back tears as Lily buried her face in her brother's chest. In that moment, the Harris family began to heal, not by forgetting the past, but by choosing a different future. Months later, on a gray November morning, Michael suggested something he had avoided for years. I want to take you both to see Daniel. His tone was steady, though his hands twisted together nervously. So they drove back toward Youngstown, the air crisp with the bite of early winter. The cemetery sat on a low hill outside town, quiet and still. Leaves, brown and brittle, clung stubbornly to bare branches. Michael carried a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, his steps heavy as he led the way to a modest headstone carved with his brother's name, Daniel Harris, beloved son and brother. For a long moment he couldn't speak. He sank to his knees in front of the grave, his shoulders trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of years. "I should have been here. I should have protected you." Tears streaked down his face. He pressed his hand against the cold stone, his breath visible in the chill air. Emily knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his back. Lily stood close, silent but steady, her small hand resting on her brother's shoulder. "You didn't fail him," Emily murmured. "You've carried that guilt for too long. Daniel wouldn't want you to live this way. He'd want you to keep going, to protect Lily, to live the life you both dreamed of." Michael closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. For years, he had carried the moment of his brother's death like a chain around his neck. But here, with his wife and sister beside him, he felt the weight begin to lift. The grief was still there, it always would be, but for the first time it no longer defined him. As they stood, snowflakes began to fall, soft, delicate, the first of the season. The cemetery grew quiet, blanketed in a hush that felt almost holy. Emily slipped her hand into Michael's, while Lily held the other. Together, they stood before Daniel's grave, a family rebuilt from loss. Michael drew in a deep breath, the cold air sharp in his lungs, and let it out slowly. "I forgive myself," he whispered. It wasn't dramatic, not a proclamation shouted into the wind. But it was real, and it was enough. The three of them walked back to the car as the snow swirled gently around them, covering the ground in a thin white veil. It was the beginning of winter, but also, for them, the beginning of something else. A new life defined not by what they had lost, but by what they had chosen to build together. For Emily, the moment carried a message she would never forget. Love and compassion could not erase tragedy, but they could transform it. They could take the sharpest pain and soften it, turning wounds into scars that no longer bled but told a story of survival. And for Michael, the message was even simpler. Family was not the chaos he had been born into. It was the people who stood by him now. Emily, steady and unyielding, and Lily, fierce and unbreakable. Together, they were proof that even the deepest wounds could heal. As the snow fell thicker, coating the earth in silence, Emily knew the truth. Love and forgiveness were stronger than grief. And in that truth, the Harris family found peace at last.